We are so blessed. You're getting Karen squared today.
Yes.
Reverend Karen squared. So we are so blessed that this beloved Reverend Karen Russo, who is the founder of the Money Keys, who's traveling all over the world, comes to New Vision Center, inspires us, shines her light for all of us. Please help me welcome my friend, my mentor, yes. Reverend Karen Russo.
Thank you, sweetheart. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh. Well, authenticity, our original agreement. The theme for 2019 is celebrating spiritual awakening, and our spiritual quality this month of March is authenticity. So as I was thinking about this talk, it's a version of you do you. I'm free to be me. And then, I love how Reverend Karen Lewis said it, we'll rub against each other. And sometimes in a good way. And sometimes in a way that will necessitate some navigation. So that's what we're up to today. And here at the New Vision Center, especially for the folks that are new, you're so welcome here. We're really glad you're here. And for those of us who have been in this teaching for decades, it's always nice to kind of anchor in our spiritual teaching, which is always based on two primary principles: love, God is all there is, and law. We create experience through consciousness. And the founder of the Science of Mind is Dr. Ernest Holmes, and I've brought a quote to start us out that is just a kind of a beautiful, there's a phrase in there that you'll hear a lot. So let's begin with this Ernest Holmes quote. So Dr. Holmes says, "While we have one common source, divine wisdom has seen fit to make each an individual. Unity does not mean uniformity. There is unity at the center with infinite variation at the circumference." And that's from Words That Heal Today. Unity does not mean uniformity. And then there's that piece about at the center there's a oneness, but at the circumference there is variety. And you've probably heard the phrase, the oneness is the center is everywhere and the circumference is nowhere, which also gives us a sense of the inclusiveness that is the oneness. So I'm going to tell a story about my own experience of this, we're one, but we're not the same, that I think speaks to this challenge of how do we show up authentically, but how do we navigate it with, all of the infinite different beings that we have. So I started out at learning this teaching in the 1990s at the Agape Center in Los Angeles. And I started out taking the classes that some of you are taking, the foundation classes and all of that, and volunteering. And I kind of began with this crew, and we were all in our 30s, and we were all single, and we were all all agape all the time, 5 nights a week. Some of you are kind of that way about the New Vision Center. It's like, Marty, she's here 24/7, right? So, and it's kind of it becomes this and people are like, thank God Marty's here 24/7. But there's that energy, especially sometimes when you're new, of I'm learning this stuff, I'm changing my life, and you develop this sense of a core group of people. So in that group is my beloved, BFF to this day, Reverend Jennifer Hadley. And at the time, you would have looked at the two of us and you would have said, two sassy brunettes, smart East Coast girls, very verbal, they're so similar. And yes, we are, and yet not always the same. So you kind of fast forward about 10 years later, and Jennifer and I were very bonded. But about that time, we were all going to become ministers, and so we had to go get our colors done, because at the time, I was kind of a sweatpants and business suits, and literally someone in the group came up to me and said, "You need some help." So we all got our colors done, and then there was a crew of us, and we would go to these workshop-y things. And at one of them, Jennifer, who's like my sister, but in front of the whole group, started to give me this feedback. Now, for those of you that know the Enneagram, Jennifer's an 8, which means a leader or strong, And she was doing what she felt was the most loving thing. She was giving me very specific, formative feedback about what I was doing with my garments. And I got triggered. I became chunky teenager, something's wrong with me, and I started to cry. And I'll never forget this moment. It's like I just walked right over to her and just hugged her, and I said, "We are one, but we are not the same." And she got it, and I got it. Because there was nothing wrong with the feedback she was giving. Lord knows I needed it. Nothing wrong. And there was nothing wrong with me having my tears and not being receptive to having it in that moment. And our bond is the deep calling unto the deep, but we had to navigate it through our differences and respecting that. So that's, to me, what I think this is the call for here this month and ongoing, is how do we really respect the things that are different and meet each other in that place where we're one. So we've got three things we'll look at here. We're going to go a little deeper into the, one with the whole. What exactly does that mean? And then I'm going to speak about living the dream. A dream can be a terrifying nightmare, or a dream can be a fantasy that inspires us. And I'm going to speak about agreement. And I'm going to introduce and preview the idea that agreement is a choice. And this month, it's a great month. Reverend Karen Lewis and Reverend Leslie Goodwin are going to continue a series based on the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. So, get yourself ready to be impeccable with your word, take nothing personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And so we're going to kind of preview that today. So let's begin with this one with the whole. One with the whole. So all that I am is of God, but I am not all that God is. There's a paradox in our oneness with the whole that I think requires us sometimes to go a little bit deeper. And so you'll see in the Science of Mind teaching symbol, which I'll often bring when I speak, is I always like to remind us that circle represents the oneness, no beginning, no end. And then the V in the center into our individualization is spirit, first cause, acted upon by law, becomes our experience. And the reason it calls us to go deeper is in some ways this. So if you take a superficial look at our principles, they can almost seem a little bit silly. And in contemporary sort of personal growth, social culture, our principles are now sort of out there everywhere. So an idea of the oneness, sometimes people will come to a center like the New Vision Center, get excited, and go home to a family dinner and kind of confront people and say, your religion is limited and I'm God. Which can get a response that's pretty actually typical, which is some version of, is that a cult and are you okay? A reasonable question. So when we say, and it's really important, and you heard Janet, our practitioner, say it in our opening prayer, when we say, let us bless every religious and spiritual seeker who is longing to have a deeper connection with the divine, we mean it. We respect the paths and the faith traditions. And in fact, one of the things that's very beautiful is Science of Mind is part of a group of religions called the New Thought, which came about sort of end of the 1800s, the Transcendentalists into the beginning of the 1900s, Ernest Holmes, Mary Baker Eddy, Charles and Murdo Fillmore, Unity, Divine Science, Christian Science are all part of a kind of a group of religions, and you'll hear the term New Thought. One of the things that's happened in the last couple of decades is people will say, New Thought, ancient wisdom, which is respecting that the principles found in New Thought, like the mystical connection of the individual with something greater, are also the principles of ancient indigenous wisdom traditions. So if you look at the Vedas, the scriptures from the East that are thousands of years old, before the Abrahamic traditions of Islam and Judaism and Christianity, those scriptures will say, "Thou art that." So there's something really powerful when we respect that across traditions, and not just the Abrahamic traditions, but across Eastern and Western and indigenous traditions, the idea that we are part of something greater is there. And Don Miguel Ruiz is referencing and comes through a lineage of the Toltec tradition. Southern Mexico, thousands of years old, and the beginning of the Four Agreements book, he tells a story of a seeker, just like you and me, who is studying to become a medicine man, medicine woman, who has an experience of looking at the stars and realizing that not just did the stars give the light, but the light creates the stars, and that the in-between is also the light, and that we are part of that. And that touching that is what we come here to do and to share together. So I'd invite you, whatever's on your heart or mind, the thing I'm working with these days is I'm really working with having a more uplifted spiritual experience of what's happening in our world politically. That's something that's really like what's on my prayer list. That's up for me. Maybe it's just me, that is interested in that. Perhaps others can relate to it. And then that may extend whatever's up for you personally. It could be an issue of revealing more wholeness or having more peace in your family, more supply in your life, greater creative expression. Whatever you're up to, just take a moment and really feel like your oneness with the light that is the greater. That's the place we start. That's the place we start. And one of the things that's beautiful, many of you know Dr. Ernest Holmes has a beautiful way of writing in the Science of Mind textbook. When I first saw it, I was like, this sentence is, undiagrammable. But when you look at it again, you can see that part of what he's writing is all the different ways we can say life or God. And he'll say capital L, life, and then do comma, creative mind, divine wisdom, what source, intent, and on and on. Well, what it was really beautiful as I read it, the story in the Four Agreements refers to the light as life, comma, or intent. And isn't that an interesting word as a synonym for God? Intent. Because that, I think, calls us to more of the creativity and more of the responsibility we have for what we make and what happens in life. And so now I'm going to talk about the nature of the law and say a moment or two about that. So the law in the Science of Mind symbol is that middle area where consciousness acted upon by law, the law always says yes, produces experience. Now, a more superficial but sort of common view of the idea of the law is like you would look at a wonderful movie like The Secret, but if you looked at it at a very surface way, you would say, boy, oh boy, get your concentration going, girl, and you can have necklaces and parking places and boyfriends, concentrate on something until you get it. And that will make us into two things. One is it'll invite us into control and manipulation, which BTW doesn't work, right? And it will also invite us into a sense of fear, because if we have to control to get it, if I have to manipulate to have it, then I'm always worried that somehow I'm going to lose it. So a deeper understanding of the law is the realization that as I am to life, life is to me, and it's more of a sense of choice and responsibility and awe rather than control, manipulation, effort, or pressure. So each of us, in our oneness with the whole, is one with the infinite, one with the intent, and we're one with the creativity, one with the choice. And one of the questions I'll have for you is whatever's on your mind or heart, whatever the primary prayer you have is, you'll want to be asking yourself, am I being the thing that I desire? And then what am I choosing to put into action today? So that is us going deeper with our wholeness. And now, we got to see what we're doing with it. So living the dream. So in living the dream, it's all about experience. And this is about the rubbing up against ourselves and each other. And I'm going to talk about the dream from the point of view of both the prison, and then I'll speak about the freedom. So human experience. If our essential nature is one with the whole, why is it we experience violence, injustice, challenges, lack, hurt, pain? So one of the things that we are required to do if we're conscious, and if you somehow got to the New Vision Center this morning, is that each of us is required to answer the question for yourself, why do the bad things happen to the seemingly good people? Your answer to that is what's called your cosmology, your belief system. And one of the things that's somewhat different about a place like the New Vision Center is we are not basing our cosmology on you have sinned and must be saved, or on there is one way, and if you follow it, you will have heaven, and if you don't follow it, you will have hell. We're not just saying you can be comforted that some will get this and others won't. And I got to tell you, in some ways, it can be a little bit of a disappointment, right? It's like, dude, I'd rather have like an authority tell me what to do, or tell me that I have to. Because if we have to, there's a clarity of experience. But what we say here, which is why you endlessly hear it from the platform, is we say you're invited. We don't say you have to. We say, this is what we're up to. This is the difference we're having in our lives. We'd love to have you join us. What do you think? And it's different, isn't it? It requires, the energy just got really like kind of, it's not bad. Okay, that's good. Okay, the invitation thing is good. It can be a little challenge, but it's a little challenging, right? It's like, it's a level of spiritual maturity and choice, is that you don't have to believe what we believe, and you don't have to think a certain way. And we're going to share with you our experiences, and we're going to share with you principles, and we're going to ask you and invite you to a class where you'll read about it and talk about how it applies to you. And then we'll say, go try it on your own. And if you're learning that 5 steps of treatment, pray about your coworker and come back and tell your group that it's like, I can't believe that guy's changed, you know? It's an invitation to choose. And what can feel like a prison is all of the veils, and Don Miguel Ruiz calls it the smoke of the mirror. The things that bind us are the ignorance, the lack, the fear, the mistaken ideas about what is spiritually true. And when those things are in front of us, we do suffer. Ruiz calls it the domestication of the human spirit. So we have these magnificent spirits, and yet we get domesticated into a sense of fear and lack and worry and concern and victimization and judgment. And when we're in those things, it is painful. So one of my teachers said, a lie believed acts as a truth until it's neutralized. And I know you all have experienced that. If there's a lie that, I can never do better than my parents, or if there's a lie that will always be in political tribes and never have harmony, if that's a lie that I believe, then I get to experience that. It acts as a truth in my own experience. So one of the things that I invite you to do, and this is why we come to spiritual community together, is to notice where you are you're in prison. Where are you believing a lie? And one of the things that's beautiful about the aspect of choice that we have is that we can always break free. And so that's why I think we've got someone breaking free here. So the other part of the dream, right? The other part of the dream is that in the midst of the pain, whether it's the political tribalism or the pain of disharmony in the workplace or the experience of lack or someone who's experiencing homelessness or whatever pain in the body, in the midst of that, the light is still there. And that is the freedom that we tune into with spiritual practice, with the circles, with the fellowship, with the classwork, with all of the various activities that we do here. What we are doing together is we're not BSing about the experience, but what we're doing is we're standing in the light that is undiminished by the smoke in front of the mirror. So life is reflecting back to us, but the light is still there. And it's more, it includes our practice. When we authentically practice these principles, we do get the comfort of a personal God who cares deeply about us, which is a necessary element of the religions that have lasted throughout thousands of years and where their believers feel a sense of comfort. There's something beautiful in that, and I always respect that in religious practices. If there's a sense of a God that loves me personally and cares for me, that is a beautiful thing, because a person who feels loved and cared for and comforted by the divine is going to be a person who's going to look to share that with others. What we also add is the spiritual psychological necessity of how do we cope with the challenges of our lives. So the question of, if I'm having disharmony in the workplace, I have to look at what in my consciousness is contributing to this. Oh, I judge that guy for being such a I judge him, that's creating some of the disharmony. So we're also about, and I'm using the word, it sounds sort of negative, but we're also about how do you cope with the challenges of our lives, in a spiritual, psychological way. And so we've got the comfort, we've got the coping, and what we also bring and experience and choose is the consciousness of the oneness, which is the something greater, which is the transformation, which is all of these things in front of me, the challenges, the things I'm praying for, the stuff I wish was different, are all part of an expression of something that is greater. And my conscious awareness that something greater is true and is real and is me, that is my spiritual awakening. And that's why all of the analogies for spiritual growth are always, I was lost, now I'm found. I was blind, now I see. I was asleep, now I wake. It's always about moving through the darkness to discover the light. All of that is here. So I invite you, as you think about, particularly this month, what is your authentic journey of living the dream? Like, where are you asleep? Where do you want to wake? Like, that's the question for you. And then the final piece is, how do we put it into action? So this is where we get into, like, agreement and choice. So agreement, I think of it as understanding combined with commitment and decision translated into action. And Reverend Leslie and Reverend Karen will go deeper into the aspects of the agreements that you're making through your behavior, your mentality, your words. All of that is something that is how we take spiritual awareness through our individualized choices and desires into life. And here's what Don Miguel Ruiz says about the nature of agreement. If you want to live a life of joy and fulfillment, you have to have the courage to break those agreements that are fear-based and claim your personal power. And what caught me on this is, if you want to live a life of joy and fulfillment, I do. Do you? Yes. Yes. Many of you are a yes. And we break the agreements with fear. We claim our personal power. And so everything that we're up to here is about choice. And it's almost like in every moment we have kind of the two roads to travel. What is the choice that we need to make? And one of the encouragements I want to have here in this community is for us to feel that individually we can be who we are, and collectively we can welcome each other. And this is something, and I'm so glad Reverend Karen said the phrase that we are radically inclusive. So one of the things that makes a center like New Vision Center thrive for 30 years through various sizes of growth and ministry and locations is that we really do mean a version of you do you, I'm free to be me, and together we're going to create something magnificent. So I sometimes feel, if I come to the New Vision Center on a Sunday, I hope someone is in ecstatic dancing. I hope someone is smiling and nodding through the talk. And I hope someone is quietly crying. And I hope someone looks just like me. And I sure hope somebody doesn't. I sure hope somebody has pierced something that I would never even dream of. I hope somebody is a pure vegan who has a certain approach to life that they love and feel great about, and that the person sitting next to them might not be. And I hope someone voted differently than me. And I hope someone has a different religious and gender and sexual experience and different points of view about life. Because if everyone was just like me, what I would lose is I would lose growth. I would lose expansion. I would lose the brilliance that you bring. This is part of who we are. If we value diversity and inclusion, and sometimes in the Valley, we can sort of look at a room and it can look more homogenous, then you have to go a little deeper and discover like how much variety there is here. And somebody next to you might show you a piercing that you're like, oh, you go. That might happen. I want to call us forward into that for the reason of spiritual deepening. That part of what we want to do, especially for those that are part of the community and feel called to really create that welcoming environment where we reveal the power of love, is let us reach out. Let us be welcoming. Let us have a sense of inclusivity. And also let us discover where you may have to walk up to someone and say, I love you, and we're one, but we're not the same. Let us create that together. So that's our message for today. We are one with the whole, something greater. We're living a dream, both in terms of what keeps us bound and what can make us free, and that the agreements we make, they're choices, and when we make those choices out of a sense of our sacred oneness with life, we are so powerful. So thank you so much. Yes. And let us pray. We're going to move this into prayer. So if you're comfortable, you can take a breath and move the body a bit and close the eye. Let us pray. So we rise up in our own awareness of our oneness with life. I am so grateful to recognize that infinite presence is inclusive. It is darkness, it is light, it is the yes and the no. It is the wholeness, the brilliance, the creativity, the power. It is intent and expression. God is, and God is all there is. Mother, Father, Creator, Atman, the greater, the higher, beauty, freedom, peace, wholeness, abundance, grace, joy. God is. God being all there is the great reality of each and every one of us. So I, Karen, remember myself. I remember who I am. And it is my honor to recognize that each and every individual here at the New Vision Center, our live streamers, those we are connected to, anyone who is touched by this vibration and message and conversation this day, that each and every one is an expression of the divine. And that is the unity from which I speak this word. I also invite the practitioners of religious science, the practitioners, students in training, the ministers to rise up and stand with me as we claim and know for this community and for all beings that our authentic agreement is with the sacred truth of life itself. So what I claim is that we say yes to the original idea that God is, as us, we are. I affirm that for every one of us who has a prayer, a desire, a longing to express more of the divine, that we are supplied and sustained and prospered and sourced with the creativity and information and wisdom and energy and strength to move and to be who we must be in this world. What I know is that fear and doubt and worry and control and judgment and victimization melts away. Our agreement is with the truth, and the truth sets us free, powerful, contributing, graced, and all. And I'm so grateful for this. I'm so grateful that this prayer is a blessing not only to us, but to all people and beings who seek a spiritual experience. I give thanks for the law that acts upon this word, and I release it. I let go, I let God be God. Together we say, and so it is.